Animorphs fans, and welcome back to the Animorphs universe. Looky here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and now we're at number 5. Number 5, The Predator, is now a graphic novel. I have the hardcover version, and I've got the paperback version on the way. I'm going to go off on a quick tangent here, something I've learned, because I pre-ordered the paperback from the UK, and it told me, oh, it's not going to get here till the 11th of September, and it's still saying that now. But on the day that this was released, I ordered a hard copy from America, and it arrived on the 3rd. So I've learned a lesson. Just wait until release day and buy it from the States, because if I pre-order it from the UK, then it's just going to take an extra week to get here. So I've learned that lesson now. Too bad, because I've already ordered book number 6, and you can do that too. So go on Amazon, you can pre-order... Hold on, where is it? You can pre-order The Capture graphic novel. Go do it now. And if you want to know whether you should buy this book, you know, I'm about to do a review, biggest question is, should you get this? The answer is yes. Do it. Also get all these ones while you're at it. Paperback and hardback. I've got hardbacks for 3 of these books now. I'm still yet to get the hardbacks for these, but they are on my wish list, so I'm hopefully going to get them for either my birthday or for Christmas. So then I'll have the full lot. Now, yeah, I've ordered the 2 copies for book 6 as well, so I'm going to have everything. And so should you. But anyway, let's get into this review. Now, first things I have to reel off are the general things, okay? So a lot of people will come into a review of this book and expect me to talk about, say, the character designs and the colour and how it's formatted. But that's a general thing, and I've covered it basically from book 1, effectively, through to book 4. And so he's not going to change his style overnight, you'd think. So I'm not going to go into reviewing how he draws the characters. We've already gone into that. You know, his humans always look the same, and they're a bit cartoony, but his animals are always great looking, yada yada yada. We've had that discussion before. We're talking purely about what's different in this book compared to the others. So the first and most obvious thing is the front cover. So the previous front covers have, from 1 to 3, been, yeah, pretty good. Then 4 came along and made me want to stab myself in the throat. And then this book's come along. It's alright. It's nothing spectacular, and it has Axe on the front, whereas it's a Marco... I was about to say it's a Marco narrated book, but we'll get more into detail of that later on, because it isn't necessarily. But it's a much better cover than the last one, so it's a massive improvement. You know, that's a positive, okay? It's probably not as good as the first 3, but it's definitely in the top 4 somewhere. Whereas book 4, I don't know what they were thinking, honestly. As usual, the quality of the book is still top-notch. You know, really nice, thick paper. You know, there's no issues with the packaging or anything like that, so don't worry if you feel like maybe the packaging's going to get lesser quality. No, it's... Well, I haven't got the paperback yet, but I've got the hardcover, and it's pretty standard for what you'd expect. So let's actually get into the meat of it, shall we? Book 5, the original book, you know, this one, was one of the best books of the series. So how does Chris Grine deal with turning it into a graphic novel? He's got a lot to work with, a lot of iconic scenes. And largely he covers it quite well. And we start off, of course, with the scene where Marco's saving the old man. And I'm immediately, as we come onto page 3, really happy. Because look at the moustache on this chap here. That is some killer moustache. And straight away you can see he's put a bit more effort into this book than the previous one. There's just more detail going on, there's more character, and the characters themselves look like there's been more thought put in. I mean, look at those two. Look at these two chaps. Look at that moustache. That's a brilliant moustache. I got a chuckle out of that. This image of Marco as a gorilla jumping out at them, and then the action sequence that follows is entertaining, thrilling. It looks like Chris Grine is indeed back on form, because book 4 was a letdown. We are back on form, I'm happy to say. You know, I was worried, because book 4 was such a letdown, and I know I've nailed that point home, but it can't be understated. Book 4, for whatever reason, Chris Grine, it was like he'd given up, And I was genuinely worried that we'd see that trend continue and books 5 and 6 would be sort of half-assed affairs. But I don't know if he's changed his coffee, but we are back on form. There was something about book 4 that maybe he just didn't jive with. But yeah, he's... Panic over. Chris Grine is still very much capable of pulling off an Animorphs graphic novel. Obviously, that depends on whether you like his style or not. I'm sort of hit and miss with it. But I'm still very happy. The one thing that's been talked about previously, and it's repeated here again, and I know I sort of said I wouldn't do this, but it happens quite a few times. There's a lot of scenes in graphic novel 5. Probably scene to amount of pages ratio is probably the highest in this book of the first 6 novels. And when it comes to an end of a scene, there's no introspection normally. So, for example, when we come to the end of the scene with the old man... By the way, there are spoilers for all the pictures you get in this, just so you know. I won't show too many. But the guy with the baseball... The old man says to Marco, "Stay away from me, you monster." And then in the actual book, there's a bit of introspection from Marco's point of view. But now here it just abruptly goes to the next scene, which it does feel a bit jarring at times. Of course, we have Axe. He's returned in this book after his introduction in the last one, and he looks the same as he did then. So same colour palette, same eyes that never seem to move. I mean, there's a bit more movement this time. Still not enough in my opinion. They're supposed to be swinging around all over the bloody shop. But look how ripped he is. Oh, he's a hunk of an Andalite. He's a hunkalite. Morphing sequences are still horrendously gruesome, but in the best possible way. You know, like you'd want in an Animorphs thing. Axe's human morph it's meh. It's meh. Basically, what were you expecting from Chris Grine? Were you expecting him to have, like, bizarre facial features? No, his face is exactly the same as the face of every other character. The only thing that distinguishes these characters is skin tone and hair. Apart from that, they're basically clones of each other. But that's just his style, and we've already covered that. Although I did have a thought. I was speaking with Raptor and Geek Truth the other day, and I said to them, I reckon Chris Grine's into anime, and they said, "Why would you say that, Adam? Usually you say very clever things, but we're suspicious about this thing." I said, fear not, for here comes the smartness. Look at Dragon Ball Z, for example. When you're in the light-hearted moments, it's all very cartoony and the lines on the faces are all simple and ha ha ha. But then as soon as you get into the serious action, in comes the detail on the faces and all that sort of stuff. And Chris Grine tends to follow a similar thing, except the detail comes in when they morph and they turn into animals. So I get the similar feeling to that, and yeah, I'm alright with it. Also, he does a relatively good job of making Axe pull silly faces when he's in human morph. First major thing I noticed. You know the mole in Animorphs? You know, it's never given a name. So what does Chris Grine do? He's just standard fonts, red on white background, the mole. I think he's being ironic. I sort of think he's being ironic. Like maybe they thought he'd come up with some snazzy name for it, because he does that with basically everything else. He comes up with new names for different shops that he's got going on in the background. Like Blue Bananas is one of the shops he's got in the background here. Buns with a Z. Manky Boots, which is a strange name for a shop. Manky Boots. Radio Shanty, obviously a play on Radio Shack. So you'd sort of think, oh, he'd probably come up with some sort of snazzy name for the mall, but I think in an ironic way he has just gone for the mall, because that's just what it's always called. I like it, honestly. I like how it's just the mall, in the most blandest possible typeface. But anyway, big news! Guess who makes a shock return in this book? Look at this frumpy guard man here, with the black moustache, bald head on top. There he is again there, and there's a couple more pictures of him floating about. He's this frumpy looking security guy. I saw him and I thought, he looks familiar. Graphic novel 1. The police officer who confronts the Animorphs and eventually at the end of the book brings Cassie down to the yurt pool. It's the same guy! It's the same guy! I thought he died. Apparently, no, he just got demoted to mall security. Welcome back, Seedle, I think his name is. You didn't die in the Earth Ball after all, because you're now a security guard in the mall. Also, speaking of mall names and shop things, there's something I noticed here, and I had to ask my wife about this, because obviously you've heard before she's American. So you've got this scene of Seidel chasing Axe through the cafeteria area, or the canteen area. Look at this here. A sign that just says frog legs. Why? I asked Pebble, do you get many places in America that sell frog legs? She just said no. And it's not like she's only ever... I stole her from New Hampshire, but she's been all over the shop. She lived in California as well for a while. And she said, no, nobody ever eats frog legs in America. And they certainly wouldn't advertise it in a mall. And I just thought, how weird that Chris Grine's put a big sign up, like deliberately up in the corner, that says frog legs. How strange. Maybe it's something he secretly likes. Well, it's like the Scottish eating haggis, isn't it? You know, it's just one of those cultural dishes. I do like a bit of haggis. I've never actually had frog's legs. Never had it. And honestly, I don't think I want to try. Anyway, the story continues on. As I know, I'm not doing a review of book 5, so yeah. Oh, by the way, the lobster sequence is brilliant. Just the way it's coloured and the lighting, especially in that panel there. I love the lighting in that panel. Chris Grine's done an excellent job. And just look at all the detail. And, you know, the backgrounds, as opposed to the last book, was just grey gradients everywhere. He varies up the backgrounds depending on where they are. And it's much, much better. Yeah, the lobster scenes overall are very, very good. And then something struck me, okay? I turned over onto page 72 and I looked at, bang, the first panel. And an immediate thought popped to my head. What pops to your head? If you thought, well, it's Marco and Jake. That was my thought. But it's not Marco and Jake. That's meant to be Peter, Marco's dad. He just looks like Jake with all the colour drained out of him, like he's had a particularly bad night. And you know what? Geek Truth said exactly the same thing. Without me prompting him to say it, of course. He just said, I thought that was Jake. And I was like, so did I. Like, I first saw him and I just thought, why is Jake... What, are they having a sleepover? But yeah, just look at that picture there. That's Jake. That's not somebody's dad. He's got kid eyes in this one. The problem is, over the course of the last few books, they have become a bit more homogenous. So the eyes for all these characters are basically the same. They're big, black pupils, okay? Go back to book 1. Let's go back to Seidel. His eyes are a lot smaller in proportion to the rest of his head. The eyes are a lot smaller, so he looks more like an adult. Chris Grine stopped doing that and they've all just got the same size eyes. And then you've got Visser 3, which we will touch on again later, but whenever his eyes were done, he had the green iris drawn around his eyes and he had very sharp features. Keep that in mind because, yeah, that's changed now. So yeah, Peter, Marco's dad, looks more like Jake than he looks like Marco. And the same with Eva as well, who, of course, spoilers for book 5, we find Eva later. Not one of them really looks like Marco at all. And she's got brown hair, he's got sort of light brown hair, and Marco's got black hair. So, what's Eva been up to? I get it, recessive genes and all that sort of stuff. It's a joke. I understand Gregor Mendel's theories, alright? Okay, so we move forward to the ant scene, which was obviously a very big scene in this book, very famous Animorphs scene from this book. And I think it was handled pretty well. I wouldn't say he knocked it out of the park, but nor would I say he disappointed. I think it was sort of what you'd expect, really, from a Chris Grine ant scene. The morphing sequences, of course, are very well done. And the scenes in the tunnel... he distinguishes the ants by colour, which is fair enough. I think that's absolutely fair. One thing he does do, and I mentioned earlier how it was strange that, you know, Axe is on the front, but Marco's the narrator, but actually, is he actually the narrator? The whole segment from page 87 to 120 is a Rachel narration. It turns into a Rachel narrated book. So from this point here, because... out of nowhere, and this struck me at first as a bit odd, but we start to get these square blocks of text. It was just so terrifying to Tobias, and then Tobias responds in the yellow box, "Coming from you, Rachel, is really saying something." That Tobias box never turns up again, at least for a while. And that's basically establishing that this is indeed Rachel talking as if in recalling to Tobias. And because I'm an Animorphs fan, and I've always, I've read Animorphs a certain way because you get used to reading it a certain way. It's done in a different way. So at first it confused me a bit. I think somebody who's not used to Animorphs would catch on to this quicker than I did, because I got to page 120, which is a very bizarre page, and I was very confused until I really thought about it. Oh, it's actually all from Rachel's perspective, and she's as if... I knew she was talking in hindsight, but to actually get a page where she finishes talking to Tobias as if recalling, it was very unusual. But thinking about it, actually, I get it, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with it. It's just, as an Animorphs fan, that's not how we're used to having it done. So, but I'm happy for the change. But when you first come to page 120, and you will know when you hit page 120. Yeah, at first it's just like, what's this? What's this all about? But yeah, just give it a few moments of thought and you'll think, right, okay, get it. If you don't think about it, it just seems wildly out of place and random. It does. But yeah, just give it a thought and it's fine, it's fine. But it does bring up something else. And that is that Chris Grine seems to be getting more comfortable with straying from the script. Sometimes he doesn't in places where he probably should have, to make things seem a bit less abrupt, like the start of the book, where I talked about the old man scene ending abruptly. Sometimes it feels like he should be a bit more free, but then other times he very clearly thinks, I'm going to add my own wording here, or I'm going to add my own little bit here, like page 120 and the fact that it changed to a Rachel narration. And you know what? One of the things that I've heard, one of the types of criticism I've heard towards these graphic novels is that he sticks so solidly to the script that he's not budging from how it's written in the books. So full credit to Chris Grine for actually, taking a risk and throwing it into a Rachel narration in the middle of the book. Fair play. Good stuff. I like the ambition. Does it always work? No. Sometimes it doesn't work. But you know what? Trying new things, you're never going to get a 100% success rate. Let's go over a few things that didn't work. I've already said what I think works, and there's a couple other bits that I think work as well. So yeah, I think the whole Rachel recalling the ant thing, I think that did work well. The mall thing, just calling it the mall, I thought worked well. It was kind of humorous how he did that. So what about where it doesn't go quite so well? Right, let's talk about this. Firstly, when he decides to add extra lines to some of the characters, sometimes it just doesn't work. So let's go to page 86. They're talking about becoming ants, and then Marco says, "Everybody ants now." And then he says, "Get it? Like that song? Except for I changed dance to ants." Never mind, as if Cassie didn't get it. What's wrong with that? Marco's not the sort who feels the need to explain his jokes. That is more of a Cassie thing. She'd be the one who's like, did you get it, guys? I changed that word and that's why it's funny. That's like a Cassie thing. Marco doing that just doesn't seem in character for him. He's self-aware about his humour, that he doesn't do that. Unless it was like ironic. I do that sometimes. I explain my crap jokes to be ironic because no one else finds it funny, but I freaking do. But anyway, yeah, Marco explaining his jokes just automatically to me was like, that's not a Marco thing to do. So I don't think Chris Grine's got a grasp on these characters fully yet. It's a bit like having a ghostwriter books where they screwed up the character stuff in the ghostwritten books. It's got that sort of feeling to it. One thing that might be controversial, something that Chris Grine has done, because Andalites have never been known to have fingernails, but of course Axe does. In a couple of different panels in this book, we see that Axe and the Andalites, by extension, have fingernails, though that was never mentioned in the books. I don't think they're meant to have fingernails. Naughty Chris Grine, how dare you put fingernails on the Andalites? How dare you? How dare you? In the words of Greta Thunberg, how dare you? You're stealing our future. It is a very nitpicky thing because Andalites having fingernails does not affect the plot in any way whatsoever. It's just one of those things that you look at and think, it's not really what Andalites look like. But then again, it's his interpretation, so fair play to you. I'm just talking from my perspective, what my opinion is, but I'll now drop it because it seriously doesn't matter. It's just nitpicky. But you know me, you know I get nitpicky. We all do, sometimes. It's fun. This is also a nitpicky one, but it's surrounded by something that isn't, to me, nitpicky. It's in the Jessica scene now. It's one of the lesser known scenes from book 5, but it's actually my favourite scene from book 5, the Jessica bit in the book. So, the fight is ended when this teacher here, this person, this very clearly old lady, comes up and puts a stop to the fight. Now, when they're in Chapman's office, he says, Mr. Halloran says you started the fight. Are you okay, Rachel? That's clearly not Mr. That's Mrs. Halloran. I mean, I know we're in modern times and apparently people don't know how biology works, but that's clearly not Mr. Halloran. Unless he was off in the distance and just decided not to intervene. It should have been blokey teacher, very clearly Mr. Halloran in there, but I think that was just, once again, it was Chris Grine sticking solidly to the script in this occasion, where previously he'd added his own little twist. He just hadn't connected those two dots, you know. But anyway, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the Jessica scene. I'm sorry to say that Chris Grine has ruined the Jessica scene, and I'm not even being facetious. He's actually somehow managed to ruin my favourite scene in the whole book. How has he managed to ruin it? Right, so in the original book, book 5, The Predator, Jessica comes and knocks into Rachel, you know, blondie. Okay, Rachel gets up, grabs Jessica, throws her onto a table, holds her down and says, don't ever touch me again, something like that. And Jessica starts flailing. Meanwhile, Marco tries to get in between them to separate the two, and while she's flailing, she manages to hit Marco in the eye and give him a black eye. That's when the teacher comes over and sends them all to Chapman's office. At which point, Marco, out of nowhere, just says, they were both after me because I'm so goddamn handsome. And Chapman was just so confused that he just sort of said, oh, get on with it, go away. And then you had the chat with Rachel and Marco afterwards. It was a fantastic scene. I loved that scene and it worked really well. How does it work in the graphic novel? So it starts off, as you'd expect, you know, Jessica comes along, bang, blondie, go boy boy. Rachel grabs Jessica and slams her to the floor. But in the next panel, Jessica's back up again and they're having like a Mexican standoff. She says, I'm gonna destroy you. Rachel says, I would love to see you try, which again, it's Chris Grine adding his own words to it. And this isn't too much of a problem at this point. It's here where we start having a problem. In the book, Jessica is on her back trying to get off of Rachel and Marco is trying to get between Rachel to hold Rachel back from causing more damage to Jessica, because Marco knows that Rachel is likely to do some serious damage. You know, that is part of Rachel's character. That, you know, foreshadows stuff to come later down the line, okay? It's actually quite important for a character. Now, instead of that happening, Marco just comes in with a big grin on his face, comes between them and says, look, girls, I know you're fighting over me, but you don't have to do this. That's the joke that in the original book 5, he made while in Chapman's office to defuse the situation. Grine has basically taken that joke and moved it here, where it ought not to be. It took away that character development moment. Not only that, but if you're going to move that joke to earlier in the scene, don't then have it happen again at the same place that happened in book 5. Not only is it weird that he repeats the same joke twice, but it also makes it far less funny and spontaneous than it appears to be in Book 5, the original version. Because it came out of nowhere. When you're reading Book 5 for the first time, The Predator, or after a few years of doing a reread, it's amusing, it's funny, because you don't expect it. You don't expect Marco to suddenly say, "Sir, they both fancy me." It comes out of nowhere. But you've already seen that joke now, so it doesn't have the humour. It's lost that humour, and it wasn't... Where he put it, where he moved it forward to, it doesn't have the same humour quality, so the joke is basically lessened to begin with. So he's ruined that. That whole bit there is just... all the great effects that it had, gone. And also, yeah, in the books, in the original book, Jessica accidentally hit Marco. She was sort of flailing, trying to hit Rachel, and that's how she hit Marco. Here he gets in between and she just clobbers him in the face. That's one of the more nitpicky bits about this, but I just think he tried to change it where he didn't need to change it. But the other stuff I mentioned is far worse, really, because you lose the Rachel foreshadowing bit, her impulsiveness. You sort of get rid of that Marco has to actually physically hold her back from really laying into Jessica, and then you ruin Marco's joke, which basically was the climactic epicness of this scene. You just ruined it, tarnished it, gone. Sorry, Chris Grine, but you majorly effed up here. And not only that, but they mentioned a couple of times after the ant scene ruining Chapman's garden. They do that a couple of times, and by that point the joke has sort of, it's had its day. When we go to Chapman's office scene, he does this thing where he says, "No, I already told you, I've no idea what could have caused the damage. I found it that way this morning." Okay, yes, tomorrow at 5. Sounds good, thank you. Yes, you too, goodbye. 2 panels that at first make you think, oh, this is going down a joke route, and then it's not, it's just him doing a mundane task. That's 2 panels wasted. You didn't need that. It's just, it starts off sounding like a joke, and then it's almost like, oh, actually the joke's not working. It's just him making a casual phone call to his gardener. It's not in the original book. Just don't bother. You're running the jokes into the ground. Stay away from your own humour, Chris Grine. I'm sorry. As someone who is also not very funny, take it from me. Your humour has failed quite massively in this section of the book, so maybe just hold back on it. And then it finishes poorly as well, because Marco says, "See, they both want me. They're both madly in love with me. And I can certainly understand why, can't you?" Jessica says, "Are you out of your mind, you little toad?" Marco says, "Oops, sounds like I may have hit a little too close to home." Eh? What does that mean? I mean, I know what the phrase hitting a little too close to home means, but what, is he implying that Jessica actually fancies him? In which case, why would she hit him twice deliberately? There must be some other reason he said that, but there isn't. It's not clear. I don't know what he's saying, but for whatever reason he gets a black eye out of it, another black eye. So, again, the joke hasn't formed right. It's not. I don't know what you're trying to do, Chris. Oops, I may have hit a little too close to home. By saying what? You didn't really say anything. You just said both Jessica and Rachel are madly in love. That's why they were attacking each other. What about that hits too close to home? Anyway, that's the worst part of the book, by the way. The fact that Chris Grine ruins the Jessica scene. We get back to normal now, okay? So we're back on normal form. Dear God, how did he manage to screw that up so much? Anyway, the Animorphs continue their plan. They've got their transponder thing, and they cool down the Yerk bug fighter as normally happens in book 5. Everything's pretty handy dandy in here, and then Visser 3 turns up. Okay, so let's go back to book 1 again. Now the thing about book 1, I mean, just look at the detailing in this book and compare it to any of the other books that follow. He really put in every last ounce of effort into book 1, and it shows, and he just sort of went a bit more casual from then on in. Look at Visser 3 in this book, book 1. See how sharp his features are, his eyes. He looks menacing and evil, and he has got very sharp features. He looks old, but also deadly. In every picture, I'm not sure how well you can see there, but he's got the green iris around his eyes. And that's pretty much the same for every time you see him here. It's a bit more obvious there, you see? You see how his eyes are done and his features are all sharp. He looks like an adult. He looks evil. How does he look in book 5? Actually, no, I'm gonna do a little quiz with you, okay? The quiz is called Axe or Visser 3. So I'm going to show you an Andalite and try to cover up speech as much as possible, and you've got to tell me if it's Axe or Visser 3. So first one, sorry about the angles we're dealing with here. Who's that? Who's that there? Okay, who was that? And then who's this up here? Who's that at the top of the page? Who's that there? Who's that there? Okay, so the first one was Axe, then you had Visser 3, and then it finished off with Visser 3 on this page here. What have you noticed? The only thing that really distinguishes them is the tan on Axe's chest. That's it. Their faces are now basically exactly the same, with the possible exception of a couple of little tiny lines that he just puts in occasionally. But no, there is no distinction. At least with the humans, you know, you've got skin colour and hair that differs quite majorly, so they sort of make the characters stand out from each other. Not all the time, but usually. Obviously, the Andalites here are very slightly varied shades of blue. There's no hairstyle with which to distinguish them, so they just look exactly the same. Unlike in book 1, where Visser 3 had all these really sharp features that have now been lost in subsequent appearances that make him look really evil. You know, the green iris around the eye as well, the sharp jaw, yeah. What's happened, Chris? Why does he now just look like a slightly darker bluer shade of Axe? We of course get Eva, but I'm not going to show that to you because obviously I don't want to spoil everything in this book. We get a few nice designs. I can't remember what the splash page was. I think it was near the end, but it was quite nice, quite good. If it wasn't a complete splash page, but it was fine. Got a lot of battle sequences in there, which, you know, par for the course, honestly. There are there's a little mistake on page 169, which initially confused me. Visser 3 has most of these red speech bubbles. Most of these red speech bubbles are his. That one there is Axe's, so it should be a different colour, but he's done them all red. So there's an incorrectly coloured bubble there that does actually make it a bit confusing when you don't spot that. And then speaking of things being incorrectly red, like in the books, Visser 1 and Visser 3 have Hork-Bajir with different coloured suits on. In the book it was red and gold. Now it's red and blue, which in a way makes sense. Maybe he's been told that further down the line that you've got the blue bands, meaning that Visser or Esplin has a troop of Hork-Bajir that specifically wear blue. Okay, I'm fine with that change. That's absolutely fine. It must have been mentioned somewhere that, you know, you want Visser 3 to have blue coloured troops. And you'd think that, but no. It's very hard to tell, because at first there's no real clear indication of which Visser has which colour Hork-Bajir. It doesn't actually say. There's a couple of little hints. So in one of these panels, it's got Eva in it, so I'm not going to show you. But it's Eva and Visser 3 walking toward the ship that the Animorphs have arrived on. And there's a Hork-Bajir without any clothing on, flanking Visser 1. And there's a Hork-Bajir with a red coat on. It's clothes, not bands, apparently, in this, which I'm fine with. It looks pretty nifty, actually. I quite like the design of it. In fact, without showing you Eva, there. I think it looks pretty snazzy, don't you? But there's one with a red top on following Visser 3. So judging from that, you'd say that probably the red ones belong to Visser 3 and the blue ones belong to Visser 1, because of course you remember in the main series, when do we start seeing the blue bands? Basically as soon as Esplin is promoted to Visser 1, which would imply that blue suits belong specifically to the rank Visser 1. Fair enough. The confusion comes in when you get the very well-spoken Hork-Bajir, who we probably all suspect is a seer of some variety. He comes along with his buddy to help the Animorphs escape from the place they're in. And they're both in red. And they are, of course, Visser 1's Hork-Bajir. So the obvious conclusion there is, so Visser 1's controllers, Visser 1's Hork-Bajir must be wearing the red colour, and Visser 3's are probably wearing blue. The problem then occurs that we never see any more blue wearing Hork-Bajir. They're all pretty much either naked or wearing red from this point on. We never see another blue one. The Hork-Bajir, who speaks well, says basically you will have to deal with any of Visser 3's troops you encounter between here and the escape pod. The implication being that all of Visser 1's Hork-Bajir have been told to stand down or at least keep their distance. So every Hork-Bajir the Animorphs would face from this point on would be Visser 3's. So when Tobias on this page says, "More coming, both directions, all of them in red," it seems like a mistake. But then of course we move forward and the Hork-Bajir that come to attack them are indeed all wearing red. Alright. So I've seen, it's one of the things that was brought up in the Discord where they say, at least be consistent, you know. If Visser 1's are wearing red, and they say, watch out for Visser 3's Hork-Bajir, then surely Visser 3's Hork-Bajir would be wearing blue, and Tobias said, look out, the ones are in blue, and they're coming to get us. But I figured it out. This isn't incorrect. This is absolutely fine. It's just it should have been shown to be clearer. What has happened in this scene here? You've got these two Hork-Bajir wearing red. Remember, they've come into the territory of Visser 1's Hork-Bajir. The two Hork-Bajir guards that were there are now naked. They've obviously been in a scuffle. So either one of two things has happened. Either the smart Hork-Bajir, the seer controller, and the other Hork-Bajir have come in, won the fight, and taken the clothing so they're disguised, and nobody's going to, you know, accuse them. Or they came in with those already on. They already wore the red suit so they can get in there, get up close to these guards, and take them out. I think that's what's happened. One of those two options. So it isn't a mistake. They're in disguise. They're disguising themselves as Visser 3's Hork-Bajir that are in red. That seems to be what's happened there. Because else it is a massive oversight. But I'm going with the most parsimonious route, which is that they should be wearing blue, but they're disguised and they're wearing red. Okay? So I think that explains it all. That makes it all make sense. And that pretty much concludes it. We get a nifty little preview, which I don't think we've had in previous books. Hold on. Yeah, previous books haven't given a preview to what happens in the next one. But this one does. We get a couple of pages of the capture. The choice of pages it gives us is pretty weird, so it just shows us Jake morphing Cockroach. I sort of get it, actually. But it's nice that we get a bit of a preview of what's to come next time. I like it. I think it's not as good as Graphic Novel 1, and I don't think any graphic novel will be as good as Graphic Novel 1 because of the sheer amount of effort he put in, and you can just tell, just flick through the pages and you'll see the difference in quality to any of the other books. Book 2 still had a bit of that quality thrown in, but it definitely took a dip. Book 4 is still easily the worst, you know, that's almost to throw it on the floor level. I reckon Book 5 is sort of along the lines of 2 and 3. You know, they're all sort of as good as each other. There's no major difference, I think. Obviously, the story of Book 5 is much better than those two, in my opinion, but that's the original book. That's not the adaptation. So yeah, in terms of adaptations, Book 1 is still the best one. These three sort of hover around the middle, and then Book 4 is down the bottom easily. I really enjoyed this, and I'm looking forward to getting my paperback version, and I'm also looking forward to the next graphic novel, which again, you can pre-order now, and it comes out in March, so actually not too far away, 6 months away, and we'll be looking at the next graphic novel. Whether we get any more after that is anybody's guess. It's looking like a no, because you'd have thought it'd be announced by now, but maybe they're just waiting for... Maybe they will, because we haven't been told no yet. Remember, we haven't yet been told no. So, and I don't think Chris Grine would wait on that. I think if he knew that it was a no, he would tell people so that there's no more waiting around for an answer. I think, you know, he's not that much of a... I don't think he's going to be that much of a tease, is he? If he got told, right, there's going to be no more Animorphs books, he'll go on Twitter or somewhere else and write, unfortunately, Animorphs fans, there are to be no more after book 6. We haven't been told that yet. So who knows? Who knows? Which is why you should go out and freaking get both versions. Buy it for your friends. Buy copies. Because the more you buy, the more chance of us getting more. That is capitalism, everybody. And it's a good thing. So go do it. Now. Okay? Thank you very much for watching. And I hope you've enjoyed this. And yeah, hopefully see you again in 6 months with the next graphic novel. Go check out my other stuff as well that I've done on this channel. Thank you very much for watching. I shall see you somewhere else in the Animorphs universe. Ta-ra!